Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event of the evening. And now, it's time!
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It is indeed time. Hopefully we had a relatively flawless start for today's episode. I should mention, are all Ramadans are problem-free, and I can certainly recall a good number of Ramadans where some interesting encounters happened, some of them fairly dangerous and some of them not so, but still harrowing in different ways. I was sitting here, in fact, start with the UK. I was sitting here where I am now in my office kind of setup. Adjacent to me is a window with Venetian blinds, horizontal Venetian blinds overlooking a garden, my garden. It was a Ramadan, middle of Ramadan, maybe towards the end of it. And maybe 2 or 3 a.m., waiting for the tahajjud time, whenever that was then. And I felt, I should say, a large thud and a series of large thuds that shook the house. Not like an earthquake, but something more timed and quick and sharp, which would nerve me somewhat. So I thought to take off my headphones and stop what I'm doing. And then I started hearing shouts, and it sounded not like you get, as I initially would have thought, louts, alcoholics, hoodlums out in the street. Because if they were, it meant they were in the garden, first and foremost, which would be quite worrying. It sounded much more deliberate. There was no swearing, and it sounded more like shouting instructions, but I couldn't quite make it out. So I thought, okay, this is quite concerning. So I turned off the lights. So the only light I had was the light coming from the computer screen. So as it went dark in my room, in my office where I was sitting, immediately sharp torchlights started penetrating the blinds and moving around. Not like one big fat torch where you're just trying to light an entire room, but as if they were lights on assault rifles or on a rifles, like that scope torchlight, very deliberate, very small radius. So I thought, okay, this seems a bit far more risky than thugs and yobs. It feels like, and it might sound like paranoia, but we'll get into why one might think like that. It felt like a hit, like someone had come to, do some damage with weapons. So I thought, no, maybe I'm overreacting. But there must be some reason these shouts and these lights are flickering all over the blinds, lighting up the room. So I've got a security camera set up, and I switched on the camera that's in front of me. I had the screen in front of me, and what I was presented with was, bear in mind, this is the middle of the night in Ramadan, half a dozen fully armed, military fatigue, or at least firearm fatigue, balaclava, SIG assault rifles, carbines, shorter barrel assault rifles. You could see the magazines in them and everything. And there were 6 of them pacing up and down. So I thought, okay, this is now not what I was expecting, and quite interesting. And I was kind of more relieved than distressed by it in some ways, because it looked like it was something from the state, although I had my doubts. And if it's from the state, they generally have rules of engagement, whereas if it was from a criminal element, they wouldn't necessarily care for such rules. So I was somewhat relieved. Before I get into that, I think I should set the background as to why I might feel sometimes a bit cautious when threats such as these initially present themselves without us verifying who is at the gate, who is at the door. So I'll just mention one episode that also happened in the UK before we drift overseas. A few years ago, we had 2 refugees here, asylum seekers, 2 plus one, their mother, 2 brothers, young guys studying, learning English initially, but both qualified in their own country where they were from, somewhere in the Eurasian landmass. Their father and their other brothers and sisters had all been killed in combat, in war, in bombings and fighting and so on. So they had succeeded to make it into the UK as refugees and as bona fide asylum claimants. And I got on fairly well with them because I traveled in and around the ballpark of where some of these guys, or where this family was from, but not from their actual country itself, not from their actual area. But we had a mutual language through which we could communicate besides English. And anyway, so they called me one day and they said, "Oh, we'd like you to come round. We have a guest. I want to introduce you to a guest." I said, "Okay, sure." So I went round and there was this guy, and he wasn't from their place, but he was a foreigner. And he was, how can you say, quite stern and grinning at the same time, almost as if he wanted to, as if he'd been backbiting the entire time. So when I came in through the door, his grin got even fiercer, which I found a bit strange. It wasn't a very friendly welcome. So I sat down in the brother's kitchen. So there was me and one of the brothers, the younger brother who I got on with quite well, the larger and gingerer of the two and younger of the two. And this guest of his started asking me a few questions, just small talk. And each time he would ask a question and I would answer, he'd say something which I didn't quite understand. I caught some words, but I didn't quite get it. My language of this language wasn't at that level. And he would laugh to himself after he'd say something. So he'd ask me a question, or we'd make some small talk. Then he would respond with something inaudible, unintelligible to me, and then he'd laugh at what he just said. And I noticed, looking at my friend whose house we were in, he was quite uncomfortable with what was happening, and he was kind of had his head down. And it was very unusual because this is your house, and you should be comfortable in your house. So this strange conversation where I was meant to see someone, I was invited to see a guest, but he wasn't exactly friendly. He was acting very strange. Continued for a few minutes, and then he got up and left. And only after he left, I thought, well, that was a bit weird. And the guy said to me, the host, the brother said to me, "Do you understand everything what he was saying? I don't think you did you?" I said, "No, I don't. Language isn't at that level. I didn't quite get it." And he said, he was cussing his wife out in the most disgusting way. Cussing his own wife out. The guy, the guest, was saying the most evil things. I won't repeat any of it, but the bits that were explained to me. But your mind can wander, depending on how much of it might dare go into the gutter. Most evil things about his wife. Of course, ordinarily, a person, if they're going to speak about their wife in public, they should not say anything bad at all. But he was saying the most vilest, evil thing. It was clear this man hated her, but hated her whilst owning her, if you know what I'm saying. She was like a captive, and yet he was dissing her and saying the most cruel and evil and sinister things about her. And the reason he was doing that is because he was from a place where I had visited and I was welcomed. So this is his way to insult me by attacking his wife, whose extended family were very good to me. That's one of the places I went and tried to, do some dawah and whatnot. And what's shocking is that this was allowed by this brother. These two brothers, as I said, they are survivors of a conflict. And in addition to that, they also know how to handle themselves. I took this younger one to some combat classes, let's say some, grappling classes, and he would slam everyone he fought with. He would slam them. And that became a kind of nickname from him, the slam man. He was that good at fighting. In fact, I was working in a college, the same college, for a short period, doing some part-time work, where he was learning English. And there was a big commotion one day, and a lot of us staff rushed towards the end of it. We just caught the end of it, and all I saw was this guy pick up a Hazara, a Shia from Afghanistan, the Hazara, the Mongol Shias, and slam him on the hard floor. And basically, him and his brother had a fight with a gang of Hazara Shia. First, it was this boy and the gang, and then his brother. His brother later came and joined in, a medical student. And they got the better of them, even though you could see his face. He wore the marks of the fight. Even so, two of them took on this gang of Hazara, and they got the better of them, slamming them essentially, and as well as throwing fisticuffs and the rest of it. The point I'm trying to make is this guy was no softy. This guy was hard. On top of that, in their custom, I mean, in general, in the culture of a guest, of a host, you would honor your guests. But on top of that, in this brother's custom or this family's customs, they absolutely would defend the honor of their brother, and especially if their brother happens to, their Muslim brother happens to be a guest. He called me to his house, remember, and yet he allowed this man to insult me, to insult his wife, to say the most disgusting, vile things. So that was really strange. It didn't make any sense. And he understood that he needed to explain himself, why he didn't smack the guy around and throw him out of the house and everything. And he said to me, that guy is a spy. And I said, what? He said, he's a spy. We never met before. He imposed himself on us. We couldn't say no because he said certain things that private information that we have never shared. So we realized that, we're being surveyed back at home or whatever, even though this guy's not from our place. And it made them very nervous, and so they had to comply. And then he said he asked for you. He asked us to bring you, so he bought you, and then he started asking you. Subhanallah. Shortly after, those brothers left. The brothers and their mother, very nice family, left our town in the north of England. I've never heard of them again. This was only a few years ago. They left abruptly. And the more I think about it, honestly speaking, I don't believe, I swear by Allah, the more I think about it, I don't believe that guy was human. Take some water. I believe he was from the other side, from the shayateen, a jinn impersonating a human being. The more I reflect on his eyes, his grin, his speech, what he was saying, how he was saying it, how he'd frightened and cowered these essentially warriors from a nation of warriors who survived war. And yet here in the free West, in the UK, he had them as if he owned them, in the way he seemed to be, in a very evil and nasty and sinister way, kufri way, owning his own wife. So for these reasons and others which we could mention, and we maybe get to some of them now or shortly, I tend to prick my ears up when things go bump in the night. So let's get back to where we were with these flashlights or these lights going off. Let's roll VT, as they say. Where is it? So hopefully you can see what I'm seeing.
Abdullah! You in shot! Show yourself!
You can see there's 6 of them. There was about as many at the back as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the front. I only found this recording later because they'd cut the actual, or the feeds mysteriously got cut in the main security cameras. This is just from the front of the house. And here you see where they're lining up to do their raid. I've taken the sound off. Of course, that's not the actual sounds. And then they left, just like they came in the middle of the night. I think for my own safety reasons, I should maybe close this soon. But essentially, they were after, as I said, firearms and fugitives, of which I was harboring and do harbor none. And I repeat that again. I told them, I have no lethal weapons. And then a certain lyric came to mind.
Cops try to flex, but guns they'll never find. My lethal weapon's my mind.
So that was that episode. But that wasn't incidentally related to my past. That was related to the future. As I said, it wasn't my first rodeo, wasn't my first barbecue. I mentioned in this specific instance, as I said, I had nothing to consider me, in trouble, a troublemaker, or any kind of violation of the law. But had they asked me, or had it been a few years earlier in a different country, I may have been in a much more compromised situation. And there's a reason for mentioning these things, inshallah. We're getting to a point of da'wah here, and a good prelude to Ramadan, inshallah. I was in one place, which I won't mention, and I was visiting a friend at evening around the Shia time, and I knocked on his house, and the women folk answered the door. And they said, "Oh, thank God you're here. Please, we need your help." And I thought, oh, maybe the bros fell down the stairs or something, or he's hurt himself or whatever, something minor. So I got in, and the main lady was frantically running around. The sister was running around. And she said, there's been something terrible's happened. I said, what's happened? She goes, the man, the brother was involved in a shootout, and there were some casualties. And he's been taken. He's alive, but he's taken some hits. But so have the other people, and there's been some death. I thought, oh my God, subhanallah. And I didn't want to, put blame on anyone or inquire any further. They were stressed out as it is, and I just thought, okay, but there's nothing I could do. What do you want from me? And then the lady went and she bought some, how should we say, paraphernalia of a firearm, holsters and the other bits and kits you can understand without saying so much. Presumably, it was presented as if this was related to the weapon that were used in the actual shootout, which was very, of course, not very good place for me to be connected to. But she presented me all this. She kind of dumped it in my lap. And she said, you need to get rid of this. I said, what are you talking about? How am I going to get rid of it? Why do you want me to get rid of it? I said, well, if they come here, and they're about to come here, we've been tipped off, they'll turn the place upside down. They'll take us on, and God knows what's going to happen to us. And, started getting all emotional, everything. Please, you need to help us. I said, but how, if they are going to raid this place and they're going to turn this place upside down, they'll know I'm here. They're probably watching now. Why would they not be? Why would they tell you they're going to raid and only raid later? Well, she said they're waiting for us to panic, or maybe waiting for us to fall asleep, and then they'll hit us when we least expect it. But yeah, they'll be watching now. I said, well, that doesn't make it easier. If they're watching now, that means they've seen me come in. They'll see me go out. And she said, don't worry. Allah will protect you. You protect us. Allah will protect you. Subhanallah. So when you're given that kind of guilt trip, it's difficult. To think perhaps rationally, although I tried, and I thought, okay, what's the options here? And I felt, okay, I'm far away from home. My parents are safe. These people are clearly not safe, and they've been told to expect some repercussions for their being part of the family of this brother who's now in custody, although probably in a hospital somewhere in custody. And I thought, well, I can't take this stuff out, this, firearms paraphernalia. By the way, this, again, to repeat, this was in a non-NATO country. I was committing no crime, to put that out there. So I thought, if I take this out in a bag, they'll know this. I just came in my jacket, just the clothes I was wearing, the coat. If I walk out with a bag, of course, they're going to immediately, whoever's there, there was likely, half a dozen scopes, rifle scopes on every exit and entry to this property. They'll jump me straight away, and they'll open the bag, and it'll look really dodgy. But then how else could I help this family? How could I take this stuff out and not be seen? So I thought, and it sounds a bit crazy, but the seemed like the safest option, the one that would arouse least suspicion, is to actually wear this stuff under my jacket, which of course is really dodgy. If someone opens your jacket, they'll see as if you're going towards to do something, right? Like you're on a mission of some sorts. But that was the only choice I felt had before me. So I actually wore this. I buckled everything up, and then I put my jacket over it, and then it's okay. I've got to go then. And then subhanAllah, amazingly, I think it's a kind of miracle, I recall leaving the house, I recall entering the apartment that I was staying in, but I recall nothing in between. My mind completely, even to this day, has gone blank. I have no recollection at all where I went, the route I took, and more importantly, what I did with this equipment, which would have incriminated me, would have incriminated them, and possibly caused more problems for the brother, which I think was more their concern than for themselves. But obviously, they had every right to be concerned for the family, what would happen to them. So subhanAllah, it's like my mind was blacked out. And this was actually a gift from Allah, I believe. Why? Because subsequently, in an unrelated episode, I was picked up and I was interrogated, and I was slipped something which made me lose control of what I was saying. Not how I was saying it, but what I was saying. In other words, had I been asked, have you carried, and I was asked, any kind of, do you recall, or whatever, stuff that you shouldn't have, whether financing or items, I would have had no choice except to say in the affirmative because of that incident, that night. But my mind went blank. I completely lost any recollection of what happened or what I did with that stuff. And so during that interrogation, I did not lie. I simply, it simply wasn't there. It wasn't in my mind until afterwards I realized that I'd forgotten what happened about the entire incident. So subhanAllah, so had these same guys who turned up, as you saw, had the same situation happened a few years ago, I would not have been let off so lightly. Okay, so the point in mentioning the above is not just to give story time for the sake of it, but I want to set the scene for how a place can go from being in such a difficult situation Islamically to being one where Islam thrives, provided the people have sabr. They do not throw themselves into destruction, as some, unfortunately, and many youth do, way too many do. And they give da'wah to Tawheed al-Sunnah, which is something that the people will find inclined towards, not giving da'wah to the nonsense that we mentioned before at the top of the show, calling to some kind of pagan conception of the divine, throwing the companions and the best of the believers under the bus. This da'wah, this filth will not resonate with anyone, but true da'wah, calling to the true worship of Allah and His oneness, exonerating the companions from every slur and slander collectively that's put upon them by the enemies, be they disbelieving or believing. That is something that people find appealing, of course. But initially, prior to that happening, there was these difficulties. I recall, and I won't mention any of these places, I don't want people to join the dots, but there was another place where there was a young kid. I'll say his name is Dima, which is a popular name all the way from the Balkans, in the West, the Balkans, Bulgaria, etc., Serbia, perhaps, yes, absolutely, all the way to Central Asia. This is a common name. And of course, Dima is also a female Arabic name. This was a male name. And so this guy had converted to Islam. He was a teen. He's very bright, from a Christian family. And he's your stereotype of a convert from that region. Blonde, blue-eyed, very well-to-do, from a good family, functioning family, non-alcoholic family, religious Christians. The brother I'd been mentoring had been mentoring him and brought him to Islam, alhamdulillah. So this was something of a victory that you get someone from the class of society that this young, intelligent, future university student represented. I met him, and alhamdulillah, he had that buzz about him after that he'd become Muslim, and he was happy to see me simply because I was Muslim. Every practicing Muslim he saw, he got excited, and he was wanting to share his how he feels in Islam and his iman, and how he's so happy to be able to fast his first Ramadan, as we're about to do ourselves soon with Muslims, learning how to pray, all the rest of it. Anyway, a few weeks later, I inquired to the brother who took his shahada. I said, "Oh, how is young Bima?" He said, "Oh, subhanallah, he's dead." What happened? He's like only 19, 18, 19 and whatever. How did he die? He said, "Oh, he was executed." What do you mean he was executed? They walked, two in plain clothes, men walked up to him, didn't frisk him, didn't take anything from him, didn't ask him any questions, shot him point blank, killed him in the street in front of everyone. And it was done purposefully. It was done purposefully to send a message that we'd rather kill our own children than allow you, Wahhabis, to take them. Subhanallah. That's a state of Islam, the state of the dawah that was there initially. They were willing to go to those lengths, and but the people persevered. There was one. Let's go back to some other footage. Where are we now? Okay, I'm going to show you this guy. This guy has won this year. What's it called? It's called the Yargin freestyle wrestling competition. 92 kilograms, representing Crimea, but he's not from Crimea. So he's basically world class, top of his league. That competition had 20 countries, mostly from the Eastern Bloc, but I think there was some from outside as well. And he beat the best of the best. He beat, anyone you can think of as in terms of good wrestlers, whether it's Dagestanis or the Ruskis or whoever it may be. He beat them all in his weight division, which is light heavyweight, I think. Yeah, light heavyweight. And he's from a town, he's from a village that I visited when he was a young lad. And they only had one mosque. And let's get back to some, if you don't mind, some scenery. He was a young lad. They only had one mosque, which they built themselves. The masajid in these areas are either licensed in that you've got permission to build them, or because you're remote, you're in a village, you're in a town, or it's the edge of a town where the authority, the state, apparently isn't having too much investment, maybe not even paying so much attention. So the people will ad hoc build their own mosques, build their own structures. And they know there's a risk it may be pulled down, but, with a bit of, backhanders, with a bit of pulling some strings and asking people in high up, some go-betweens, put a good word. Those mosques may be allowed until they can catch up and get necessary paperwork. So I visited this wrestling phenom's village when he was a young child, and I was quite familiar with it. And one day when I was about to visit to it, I heard of an incident that happened, a couple of days before. And so I went there and I saw that what they had relayed was true from the bullet holes in the mosque. You had a group of armed men, not unlike what we saw earlier in the clip I showed, blacked up balaclavas, assault rifles. They shut the mosque from the outside. This was an evening prayer, so there was only young men inside, including very young children, boys and girls, very young, and a bunch of, teens and adolescents and young men, and the imam. They shut the mosque up from the outside, and then they walked into the mosque with the masajid, and they started bullying the children, slapping them around, pushing them around. Shots were fired. They didn't kill anyone, thank God, but that wasn't their goal. Their goal was to frighten the worshippers. There was no insignia. So it's not clear whether these were from the state or from a criminal element or someone in between, one of these shadowy organizations that has its own vested interests, that feels threatened by Islam. And we can allow our minds to conjecture on what kind of organizations will feel threatened by religiosity in terms of what Islam would encourage and discourage from produce or from behavior, criminal behavior. And again, it could have been something actually official, but there was no insignia. What was clear is that these people were very dangerous, armed to the teeth. They didn't care where their bullets were landing. As I said, they shot in around the walls of the mosque, and I saw the casing still in there when I visited. And they were slapping children around, which of course is a crime in any country. You're not allowed to beat up 7, 8, 9-year-old boys and girls. But they were making that point to frighten the people again, that we don't want this Islam here. We don't want religion, this religion, your religion, to be spreading here. Know your place. And they left. And subhanallah, now we see this guy that I showed you earlier, who is now a hero with a full-fledged beard, practicing Muslim, representing Crimea, although he's from that town. It just shows the massive, I'm hoping people can get it. It just shows that not within 100 years or 50 years, but within the same generation, the fruits of sabr, of steadfastness upon the sunnah. I'm not going to take credit for it. There were other brothers and, Duat, and eventually they had graduates from Islamic universities, but I was certainly part of the crew, maybe you could say as an observer, a participant observer. But look at the fruits. You have prayerful, practicing, devout Muslims wearing their Islam on their sleeve in a way that would have got them arrested and disappeared, executed, as we mentioned. Let's give another example. Let's go to this slide. How do you move? 1 second. So it need to be.
I think Floyd Mayweather got into the mats with Jordan Burroughs. Floyd Mayweather would be thrown away. He'd be humiliated. No one would know anything about him.
So there you have a popular, of course, that's not Sabur, that's Mohammed Jawad speaking to Jake. And he mentions Jordan Burroughs. Jordan Burroughs is an American wrestler, considered perhaps the greatest, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. What people don't know, even the casuals know his name, but what they don't know, perhaps, is that he was defeated twice at the highest level in the Olympics and in the World Championships by two prayerful Muslims. This is one of them, and this is him reacting. This is Jordan Burroughs, in case it's not clear. This is our brother who defeated him in the 2016 Summer Olympics in Brazil. And here's a short interview where he's asked a question.
Вопрос как раз от подписчика Абу Умар Хаджимурат. Он задает такой вопрос: какое место в твоей жизни занимает вера во Всевышнего?
Как можно ответить на этот вопрос? Самое высокое место занимает. Естественно, мы верующие люди, считаю себя мусульманином, и, естественно, часто надо вспоминать, кто тебя создал, надо знать, к кому ты обращаешься, насчет мольбы, не знаю. Все знают, какой вопрос для мусульманина, вера на каком месте может быть. Там это не обсуждается, естественно.
The significance of this cannot be understated. Again, this is from a region where mosques were getting shut up, where children were getting executed for converting to Islam. And yet here you have their equivalent of a UK's David Beckham, or if you want to go back further, Paul Gascoigne. This is how much these people are looked up to, national heroes. In fact, one of them who won the judo gold in an early Olympics, when he got his hero's welcome, he went, and the first thing he spoke about was Islam. You had to imagine tens of thousands of people turn up to greet him, and he decides that he's going to speak about Islam. So this is an amazing and joyful turn of events where the religion has won over the high and low of society. Yeah. In fact, I can juxtapose. I don't have it because it was streaming or pre, where you can get everything on the internet essentially. But I may be able to locate this interview. Its significance can be juxtaposed by an interview that was given to a similar wrestling champion a few Olympics before that, when things weren't so nice, when the authorities weren't so pleasant. And that brother, that champion, coming back, should have received a hero's welcome. He had a thin beard, like this brother at the time. And he was also interviewed by a female journalist, and this sister, inshallah, although she's on her way, let's just say, I won't say anything more than that. May Allah continue to guide her. Up and coming star, media celebrity. But anyway, this early incident where the interviewer, with disdain and hatred, said, "What's this on your face?" That's how she spoke to an Olympic champion. An Olympic champion represented your country at the highest level. And she said, "What's this on your face, this growth, this beard?" And he said, "Well, I'm a man. Why can't I have a beard? If this is what Allah gives us, then this is what. Why shouldn't we have it?" That's how he was treated, let alone any questions about or tell us about your faith. Yet here on national television, a Muslim, a religious Muslim, seemingly asks him what place. It's a setup, of course. This is how he was doing dawah. The questioner wanted him to do dawah, so he found an excuse. What place does the Almighty have in your life? And he said, "Well, of course, I'm a Muslim. And we're Muslims. We believe in Allah. We pray to Him. We make dua to Him, and so on." And that's just a clip. And she didn't filter the question. She was happy to answer it, and she was happy to receive it without interruption. Again, we might think, well, so what? This happens all the time. People have asked about their faith. Not in these places. This is a sea change, a massive change. And this is the fruits of the dawah. That same Olympic hero, the one we've just shown, when he went to make Hajj, who hosted him? He was hosted by two master students from the Jamia Islamiyah, the Islamic University in Medina. High-flying master students, very at the top of their class. One was doing his masters in tafsir of the Quran, and he himself was a master of sports in sambo. So he himself was very good, knew how to look after himself. But as well as having that vocation in Medina, he was doing his masters in tafsir, in a particular aspect of tafsir. And the other brother, who was from this Olympians region, and same as the other Olympian we saw earlier, he was doing his masters in siyasat al-sharia, which can be translated as political science, but it doesn't actually mean that. And that term, of course, was made famous by Ibn Taymiyyah, subhanallah. So you have this is essentially the fruits within one generation of tasfiyah and tarbiyah, cleaning innovations and heresies and alien accretions from the religion of Islam, and tarbiyah, raising the youth, the men and the women, upon that purified true Islam, until even the heroes and their champions are able to wear their religion and boast about it. They can now grow their beards without fear of getting stopped or arrested, or without disappearing. The women can wear hijab, whereas in one generation before, or in the earlier part of that same generation, they would be manhandled and abused for wearing hijab, and so many other things can be said. So subhanAllah, this is the fruits of dawah. Alhamdulillah, if only we are patient. Indeed, this is a promise of Allah, where He said, did He not? هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا. It is He who sent His messenger with guidance and the religion of truth, that He may make it ascendant over all religions, and Allah is all sufficient as a witness. That's what I wanted to give by way of today's episode presentation. Of course, as always, we can't cram everything in, and we could delve on to so much more. And I hope I've only left some crumbs, but hopefully disjointed in different countries, including our own, so as not to allow others to join the dots. But that's not important. What is important is not the place and the time and the where and the who's. But what is happening, what has happened, alhamdulillah, this should give us all encouragement that no matter how down a person is, no matter how low, first of all, how low they think they are, they should always know there are people in a more difficult situation, and we should not despair of Allah's mercy. But then, with hardship, there is ease. Innamal usri yusra. With the hardship, ease will surely follow. And this is not but the sunnah of Allah with His people, with His slaves. And this is what we saw happen to the best of His slaves, the best of all mankind, Sayyid al-Anbiya, Imam al-Mujahideen, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Rasul al-Kareem. He bore the brunt of the worst of the torture, him and his companions, him and his community that was dished out, until they were facing existential threats of being wiped out by the mushrikeen, by the pagans, by the enemy, until they were eventually victorious. They were always going to be victorious in the hereafter, but even in this world, they became victorious. So that's what I wanted to say on that. Now we go to your questions and the chat. Why the new channel? So this is, as I mentioned previously, this is only for lives and for smaller segments, for clips, just to keep the audience engaged, simply because the format that I was using on the other channel, well, not simply, there's actually several reasons. One of the reasons is because I'm still going to recover my hard drive, and I don't have to redo a lot of work I did in order to continue with those playlists. So I have a lot of work that just needs a bit of tweaking, and it can be uploaded. But I need to recover my data still. So until that happens, I will pause from that channel and do lives here. Also because that channel was facing some restrictions, some blocks and restrictions and strikes, all of them malicious. And it looked like I was having a losing battle. I was fighting a losing battle. Everything is still okay and alive now, but just in case the channel gets shut down, then at least we already have some traction with the viewership with this channel. And should that channel get shut down, I'll just rebrand it, remove the live, and re-upload everything here. But yes, I'm keeping both channels online and current, just until we see what we can do in terms of continuing with the uploads of the existing channel. Have you got anything? I apologize if the grammar is lagging. Above that. In what extent is dawah more effective? Let's see if I can do this first of all. Yay! Okay, see, we're learning. We can actually display the questions. To what extent is dawah more effective when it's a person speaking to his own ethnic group in comparison to when it's being done by a foreigner? For the most part, it's far more effective. Every prophet was sent to his own nation, speaking their language, and every prophet has certain traits, alayhim salam. They were generally handsome, from good families. I shouldn't say generally, they were all, from what we know, handsome, as the ulama explain, handsome, from good families, non-lineage. They were not, a'udhu billah, the children of illicit relationships. They were eloquent, and even where they had some speech impediments, Allah would fix that for them. They were how can you say, known to be honest, known to be truthful. They had no past that would make people doubt that this person could be lying to us, or is unworthy of being heard from. And beyond all, and in top, or in addition to all of that, they were from the people. They were speaking to the people as if they were, and they truly were, a part of them. The distinction, of course, is with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in that he was sent to all of mankind, all of humanity, and to the jinn. And this is a commission and a mission that was exclusive to him, because he was the final universal prophet. But even so, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam still dealt initially with the Quraysh, with his own tribe. He gave da'wah to his own tribe. Most of his companions were Arabs. There were non-Arabs amongst them. Salman al-Farisi, Suhaib al-Rumi, honorary Byzantine companion, Bilal al-Habashi, Abyssinian, and Abdullah, you could say al-Hibri, Abdullah bin Salam, who was from the children of Israel. And this again is a proof of the universality of Islam, because all of, for example, Jesus' disciples that the Christians will acknowledge were his disciples. From their perspective, they were all Hebrew Jews, but from the tribe of Judah, like their prophet, because he was only sent to his own people. So all the messengers were sent to their own people, the prophets plus in addition to all of mankind. But even so, his starting ground and his life mission was dealing with his own people, because they can relate him more. That's not to say that some people might find a bit of the exotic more attractive. We can't rule out the fact that someone who's from a different nation will be attracted to a foreigner, to someone who looks a bit different, who speaks a bit different, especially if those foreigners may come from a society or a culture which is more ascendant than their own. So, for example, if you had in a colonial setting, or what we did have in a colonial setting, for example, the British Raj, when the British ruled India, when you had the likes of Marmaduke Pickthall speaking and giving dawah, or Abdullah Quilliam, it had more impact upon the locals, because he was the master over the subjugated, and yet he chose Islam. So even if he was at the highest society, and he represented the elites of Victorian Britain, of the Queen Victoria's empire, yet he'd abandoned their religion, i.e. Christianity, the formal religion, and adopted Islam. So that had some impact, of course. It makes people question. And I actually saw in some of these places I traveled to, I saw one of the dawah anecdotes that the Imam of the masjid, who's since unfortunately been executed, liquidated, for his efficacy. But at that time, now it's better, but at that time, one of the things he said from the pulpit was that they are telling us that we are backward, that our religion shouldn't be followed, and that the more we follow it, it's a sign of our regression. Yet, and then he pointed westwards, and he said, yet in the West, and then he named some celebrities that even they were aware of where they were. Yet such and such has become Muslim, and such has become Muslim, and they are looked up to as being at the pinnacle, the first world, compared to where we are. So if Islam is supposed to be backward, why are the people who are forward embracing Islam? And it's a fair argument to make. So for some people, foreigners and some cultures, when they have that dynamic, a foreigner will have more impact than the locals. But ordinarily, if you want to appeal to the lowest common denominator, and by that I mean the racist, the lowest common denominator, then they will find any excuse, those who are arrogant, to reject Islam. And you don't want to give color and ethnicity as an excuse for them, as a get out of, as a cop out. So when they have someone who's from their own color or their own ethnos, their own nationality, speaks their language, speaks the Queen's English or the King's English, in a sense, then the excuses are removed. No need to apologize for anything. Okay. Let's do this. Now we're having fun with this this feature that I've just figured out. Have you got anything about modern issues regarding Islam and the Muslims, issues in terms of world politics, and how certain policies affect Muslims, now to solve, and signs of the hour? I mean, that's loaded. There's many things there. So, I mean, in terms of world politics, geopolitical issues, obviously the reason for the season, and has been for a while, is Palestine. So there's, we've not so much on YouTube because of the issue with not wanting to be closed down. When you speak about certain geopolitical issues, it's a risky situation. On X and on other platforms, you can get away with saying more. On Rumble, which I do have a channel, but I haven't uploaded all the videos there, you can get away with saying a lot more than you can on YouTube. So I stay away. I'm very cautious for speaking so much about geopolitics on YouTube, simply for the risk of being banned and then the channel shut down, like Palestine. I tried to upload a video here on Palestine. I've got 3 videos online now on Palestine and one link to another one. And when I did put one video up once, it was immediately blocked, and I got a warning that, this has been deemed by the Matrix to be unsuitable and violation of their terms. It wasn't, of course, it was speaking facts, and it wasn't glorifying anything illegal, but the fact that you take a position which goes against the other side, you give them an excuse. I didn't want to give them a stick to beat me with, so I stay I have to speak cautiously on issues of geopolitics so as not to cause problems for the channel. But that being said, I do have maybe the next stream I will cover some issues directly related to Palestine, Iran, and geopolitics. And those two things are the things that have got me in trouble. The Rafida, the people of Tehran and the people of Tel Aviv, let's just say, have caused a lot of problems for this channel. But we'll see if we can tackle it and tackle them next stream. Okay, why are you hating on Abdul Wahab for defending the honor of Rasulullah? Which Abdul Wahab? I have no idea who you're talking about. Who's Abdul Wahab? Is the one? Maybe you're talking about the Warner? Is his name Abdul Wahab? Well, I wasn't hating on him. I was hating on his actions which he did not recant from, and I explained at length over 2 streams. One on this. No, I don't think any of them on this. I think they were both put on the other channel. Yes, one of them does cover that issue about how we are supposed to honor the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I myself have spent all my adult life honoring him, and I'm sure many of you do too. So I wouldn't hate anyone for defending the honor, but where their actions are counterproductive, that they end up dishonoring the Prophet ﷺ and causing people to move away from Islam, and where there's oppression, then Islam is free of this, as is our Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So again, maybe I'm not understanding, but I don't know what you're referring to here specifically. I'm just guessing, and I may have added 2 and 2 and got 786. So then someone says what he did wasn't honoring the Prophet. So again, it depends if we're talking about the same episode or not. I don't know. Are you a pacifist? No, we are peaceful. Muslims are peaceful, but we're not pacifists. The IST suggests an ideology. We believe in qisas, retribution. We believe in corporal punishments. We believe in jihad. So how can we be pacifists? I'm talking about all aspects of jihad, both the jihad of the pen and jihad of the sword. So we are not pacifists. Sounds like we cowardice. What sounds like we cowardice? This is just stupid. Now you're just being, you're being stupid. I suggest maybe you're a troll. I don't know if you're a Muslim or not, but if you're a Muslim, and I have every reason we have no reason to trust people in Cyberstan when they just throw out this kind of rage baiting, gaslighting comments. But if you care, if you care about the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if you are a Muslim, your name doesn't suggest you are, your idiocy doesn't suggest you are, but if you are, then see the Messenger's guidance on this. We covered this at length, and we talked about the fiqh of abode, territoriality. Again, this is assuming we're talking about the same thing. I don't know if we are. So this person says, he goes on to say, sounds like you lot want to appease the Jews and Christians by turning the other cheek. How is believing in jihad turning the other cheek? Do you know what jihad is and what the rules of engagement are? That if you're violently assaulted, first of all, even outside the jihad zone situation, even in the West, a person is allowed to defend himself. And on top of that, if you're attacked, if a country is attacked, they're obliged to defend themselves. So my suspicion is that this person saying this is actually the groups he's mentioning. He's saying we want to appease the Jews or Christians. You prove to me that you yourself are not a Jew or a Christian, Islamophobe, just trying to rage bait, because you know our position and how we support the Mujahideen. So this is just an idiot, rage baiting, gaslighting, wasting our time. Why do so many tyrannical regimes have Sufis in their employ? What about the Ashari Creed makes this a phenomenon? Is it just a result of their general deviance? Perhaps a part of it, perhaps also because Sufis can be co-opted. Sufis, even, we mentioned jihad. I'll say the J word. I don't know how much you're allowed to get away with, to be honest. So I'll just say, sorry, this isn't, can you see? Yeah, you can see this. So Sufis, even during, not all, some strains of Sufism, such as the Naqshbandis, they would fight, but other Sufis were aloof. So, and their religion, depending on the extent of their Sufism, is so far from being engaged with society. Many of them believe in rapture, a form of rapture in the way that evangelicals do, fana, losing oneself and being drunkard on what they would say is the love of Allah, and distance himself from society, becoming almost like beggars, being a drain on the Mujahideen. Of course, I'm generalizing on the state. You do have those who actually do fight and do take part, but many can be easily co-opted by tyrannical regimes. But at the same time, so can people who claim to be Ahlul Hadith. Those who claim to be Ahlul Sunnah, pure Salafi in a creed, can also be co-opted by tyrants and sing from their hymn sheets and oppress righteous people and fight the dawah. And this happens in every society. You get crooks, you get criminals, in spite of their creed. But it is true that many tyrants do have the Asha'ira in their employment, and the Asha'ira are not for all Ahlul Bidah, essentially one millah in one regard, whether they are the Shia or the Asha'ira. What do they, and I can't remember if I said this at the front, at the top of the hour, but the Rafida, they say that all of the extreme Shia say all of the companions, or most of the companions, apostatized or were hypocrites, munafiqeen and murtaddeen, and they betrayed the messenger, which is a ridiculous notion. Just logically makes no sense that that the Prophet could allow this, Allah would allow this to happen. But this is what they believe, or this is what they claim, that most of the companions were hypocrites or apostates. And as we evidenced, the forefathers of the Asha'ira and the Maturidiyya believe that most of the companions and the Tabi'in and the Salaf were ignoramuses, and they didn't have true knowledge. The true knowledge was really that which is Greek philosophy, because that's how, of aspects of Greek philosophy that they received and polished by the Mu'tazilites. And that's because when they speak of the divine, and they speak of what they will say is tanzih or tanzih, transcendence, freeing Allah from all flaws, deficiencies, and imperfection, is actually forcing the conception of Allah to comply with the Aristotelian conception. Okay, so just because we're happy to allow morons to give us an excuse to some teaching moments, this guy is saying, this troll, militant, he's calling another brother, he's saying, are you a murji? The brother, now I realize I'm getting involved in a back and forth online. But the brother, who he's called a murji, by a murji is someone who basically believes that actions don't affect iman. But the brother said a hadith. He quoted a hadith. You can see, beware, the extremists are perished, saying it 3 times. Sahih, according to Al-Bani. So notice, a brother, and this is what I said earlier, we would mention what Allah and His Messenger says, what Allah and His Messenger would teach us is our religion, and then you have the opponents attacking us for it. This brother posted a hadith and then he gets attacked for it. Oh, you're a deviant. What does this say about the person? What does it say about someone who is not claiming to be a Muslim, but he's presenting himself as if he's a Muslim? We've got no evidence he's a Muslim. This other moron. So you bring a hadith and he says, oh, so you must be a deviant. This suggests that this person himself is a disbeliever because he's not satisfied with the speech of Allah. And the ayat and the hadith are numerous and plentiful about this, that whoever opposes the messenger and the guidance and the believers and follows a path other than the way of the believers, nuwallihi ma tawalla, we will leave in the path he is chosen, wa nuslihi jahannam, and burn him in hell. Wasa'at masira, what an evil destination. That's for the Shaykh Rasul, whoever opposes the messenger and follows the path other than the believers. So a brother's given a hadith and then immediately starts insulting him, calling him a deviant. This suggests that person himself is a disbeliever. Walaikum Assalam, Features. How are you doing, bro? It would be good to actually have some interaction as an audio interaction. I'll have to figure how to do that, how to share a link so that the people can. We have no issue with people joining in and speaking, including the brothers who we know. So yeah, that's something we could do. I'll just figure out how to. What is your opinion of Shia internet trolls? I imagine my opinion is the same as everyone else's. I mean, trolls are not good to start with. I've used the term for myself as a kind of tongue-in-cheek super troll. What I mean by that is I will troll a troll. If he's wasting my time, I will humor him and try to humiliate him, her, them, it, whatever they are. And of course, being a Shia is not a good thing. So if you're a troll and you happen to be a Shia, then that's a double negative. And double negatives in this case don't make a positive. So no, I obviously have a very low opinion of trolls and Shia independently of being a Shia troll. And if they're on the internet wasting our time, we'd rather they didn't. Barakallahu feek. Thank you. Plenty more where those came from. But we have to be careful how much of them we can say, what clips we can show, at the risk of getting unwelcome visitors another time. Okay, can you write a poetry in your style about Tawheed Khalis and the Sunnah of the Khulafa Rashidun and history and wisdom, the pearls of experience and lessons from yourself? I guess I could. I mean, when I get back to the traditional videos, I tend to like to put in poetry or rhyming. I wouldn't know if you can call it poetry rhyming. There are some poems I translate like from Arabic, and I will like to keep the poetry, the rhyming, genuine poems there, or rhymes. And I like to keep the rhyming in the translation. But sometimes some people say it's too much. If the entire 30-minute video episode is just all poetry, it gets a bit too much. So maybe less is more, is what's required. So I don't know. I could do, but if that's something that's useful, I'll certainly do part of it. Maybe we could do it as a type of aqidah, a type of creed, and have all that as a poem in the style of the Arabs of old, Hununiya and Alfiya and things like this. What else we got? John Burroughs is a legend in wrestling. Didn't know he lost to he lost to two good brothers, two religious brothers, who are now to us 1 degree of separation, let's say, between us and them. Alhamdulillah, two wobblers, for want of a better phrase. Okay, so there's a partial hadith here. There's only a partial hadith. Messenger of Allah said, "Verily, rules will come after me. Whoever enters their audience, affirms their lies and supports them." Yeah, this is half of the hadith. I have a full playlist talking about where this hadith is mentioned and its proper explanation, and all the other similar hadith. If you look at the Civil War series, the very first episode called Times of Tyranny, because it's related to tyranny of rulers. So I suggest you look to that, because unlike the people of innovation, the people of Sunnah, they address every calamity and every fitna by returning to the book and the Sunnah, by seeing the guidance Allah and His Messenger has given him. And had we not done that, or because we did do that, in certain places we visited, we've seen the fruits. We've seen the fruits of our dawah. But those who chose to do another way, the way that this person seems to suggest, so he thinks he's being tough and talking about, fighting back and everything like that. All of those guys were massacred, and their women were left as widows, their children as orphans, and sometimes even their women and children were oppressed. And again, this is from firsthand being there. I've seen even their children were oppressed, weren't allowed to. They became what's the term? They were kind of banished. They weren't allowed to be educated. And imagine a child. It's clear that this kid is a kid, and he's not responsible for what his father did. But even so, on his future, they close the lid so that he can't benefit from society, and he may as well just stay hid. So this is what following a methodology other than that of the Salaf, other than that of the Prophet, his companions and their successors does when you try to reform society. When you take the ill-gotten, how can you say, poorly traversed path of deviance before us, you reap the whirlwind and the results of those deviants, which is people get massacred, nothing is achieved. As Hassan al-Basri said, when one group of people wanted to revolt against a tyrant, who some of the scholars even declared to be a disbeliever, Hajjaj bin Yusuf, he said not even for a day did they achieve any good. They all went out and they all got massacred. But those who stayed the course and who are truly brave in the face of violence. Let me make this point, and inshallah, I do intend to talk about jihad at depth, at length. We won't shy away from this, and we'll speak from lots of personal experiences as well on this issue. But it's easy for a young man. It's very easy. I know plenty personally for a young man to say, right, that's it. I'm going to fight. I'm going to get a weapon. I'm going to, by fair means or foul, I'm going to bum rush the police station and take their weapons, and then we'll take on the paramilitary, and then we'll have an actual military to fight, and we'll establish an Islamic State. Plenty of people I've known personally who've tried that and ended up all getting killed or arrested or became turncoats, spies, crooks, working for quote unquote the feds. In the end, not only did they not achieve nothing, but that is actually cowardice. It's cowardice sorry, that's not the right word. It's reckless and not as brave. That's what I really should say. It's not as brave as the man who says, look, I can take a weapon and fight, or I could bear with the oppression and focus on the weak who can't fight, right? If it's easy for the young man to run at the poor, but what about his mother? His poor old mother, his infirm grandparents, his woman and his kids? Who's going to look after them when you've attained your martyrdom, right? True bravery would be staying steadfast and bearing with the oppression as much as you're allowed to bear, because if it gets intolerable, then you make hijrah. Allah does not want for us to suffer unnecessarily. He wants for us ease, and he doesn't want for us hardship, as the ayah says. So if you can bear the how can you say, climate of Islamophobia and still do dawah and still educate your family and your neighbors in society, then that's the thing to do. Whereas if you go, and that's bravery, because it's hard work. It's hard work studying, seeking knowledge in places where it's difficult, where you could get into trouble for possessing certain books, which we spoke about last stream, for getting arrested, for being caught teaching other people, even in the privacy of their home. Like in one place far to the east, the only way they would actually teach was on car journeys. The brother would graduate from an Islamic university, or when he'd be coming back from a certain Islamic university in his summer holidays, because they'd be arrested in their police state had they had gatherings in the masjid or in their homes, even in their homes, because spies were everywhere, and now it's even worse with the surveillance technology. They would have long car journeys, and that's where the brother, who was the teacher, would teach the other passengers, and different passengers would take turns. That's how they were doing dawah, subhanAllah, in certain parts of the Far East. That's the only way they could teach. And alhamdulillah, the results, of course, there's still some difficulty, but the results have borne fruit. In myself, when I was in Imam University, I had some students from those countries, many countries, and they were able to keep coming and keep studying because they never gave up teaching generation after generation, despite whatever kind of atheistic overlord was ruling over them at any one time. Even Sheikh al-Albani, there was a point where he was under house arrest. He was thrown out of the country where he'd settled originally, Syria, from pillar to post, as if he was being moved around. And even in Jordan, he wasn't allowed to teach in his last years, towards the end. So how did they get around to it? That someone would invite everyone for a dinner, like a meeting, like a kind of what they call, inviting people for dinner or for lunch or whatever. And that was the excuse they would use then for Sheikh Albani to teach, right? Because it's like an impromptu Q&A session while everyone's there to have a friendly social gathering, as opposed to a formal teaching. Why? Who put these difficulties? The Ash'ari, the Ahlul Bidah, the people of Sa'id Fawda. They essentially banned the Salafi Dawah in that country. And so this was the only way they could teach. So that's true bravery. That's true bravery. Staying, first of all, firm upon the truth, and then being steadfast with the truth, which is the explanation of Surah An-Nasr. And as Ibn Taymiyyah says, these three aspects go hand in hand with enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. And the first is that you have to have knowledge before you do it, of what you're doing, of your teaching, and of your promoting virtue and preventing vice. You have to have knowledge of it. 2, you must do it with gentleness while you're doing it, while you're teaching and enjoying the good and forbidding the evil. And 3, you must be patient as regards to the results. And I think, inshallah, we've given you some proof with some celebrities, at least in that part of the world, they're celebrities, and depending on which spot one follows, they will recognize their celebrity status, even if it's against the American heroes that they've defeated. That even at that level, success has been witnessed on the international scene of those who stayed the course, whilst in their youth their mosques were being shut up, their families, their friends were being manhandled and slapped around, and converts to their community were being executed in broad daylight on the streets. So this is the fruits of our dawah, and those people are not in any way, shape or form cowards. Rather, the cowards are the ones who from behind the screens attack the hadith that upsets them, and then half quote hadith that they think fits to their perception of religion. And that's why Tabari, when he speaks about the ayah about the muhkamat and the mutashabihat, the verses which are ambiguous as opposed to the verses which are clear and legislative, he mentions how the Ahlul Bidah, the people of innovation, they wallow in the clouds, in this mutashabihat, the ambiguity. Nothing with them is clear. They wallow in ambiguity, and that's how they're able to fester their deviation and allow it to grow. Whereas the people of Sunnah, our religion is clear and bayyin, and there's no mincing around or using a hadith when it suits us and suppressing another hadith that doesn't suit us. All of the religion, all our religion is clear, complementary of every other aspect of it. Just going through some messages. I'll finish when you guys finish, by the way, guys and girls. As soon as we see the messages slow down, then we'll stop. How did you remain reliant on Allah and extreme fear, uncertainty, hinting at the stories? The way any Muslim would. I don't think there's nothing special about me at all. I think any Muslim in a particular certain position, he's tested, especially when he sees how the people around him are tested. Far worse. At the end of the day, I had a passport which gave me and gives me some out. Those people locals don't have the benefit of that passport. Although there was some times when even the passport didn't work. We'll speak about those another day, where things got a bit nasty. But yeah, we'll leave that for another time. But anyway, I think any Muslim, yourselves, would behave or would stay reliant upon Allah in the similar situation. It's simply what our Iman does to us, or what Islam does to us, the legacy of our Messenger Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and what he suffered and his companions suffered and his family suffered. It makes it easy for us to reflect and think, relatively speaking, we got it good, and how else? And sometimes I was going to say, how else can we but prove our Iman? Of course, Allah mentions that we will be tested, and sometimes we want to. How can you say? And this is the third level of reliance on Allah. You want to hope that you are tested, because you feel that without being tested, I know how poor and porous my own coming in and out of taqwa is on a day-to-day basis. So I need to be tested in order to expiate my sins. Otherwise, if we're not tested, whether with relationships, with finance, with violence, with legal issues, wherever it may be, with health, of course, is a big one. Then you're going to wonder, well, what have I contributed for my akhirah, if considering the state of my own deeds being so low. That's how Muslims should ought to think anyway. So I don't think there's anything at all special here any more than any Muslim who is inshallah firm upon Islam outside a difficult situation. Inshallah, they will be firm upon it when faced with a difficult situation. And then maybe that one person's test will be a failure for someone else. So from the mercy of Allah is that He will only test you according to a test that you can bear. All of the tools and the flashlights and the map have been given to navigate your way out. It's up to us then to decide whether we're going to pass that test or fail it. Okay, we have, can you make a video regarding Imam Ibn Taymiyyah and why the Imam used kalam at times? Loads of Ashis use this as Gaudial card. He didn't use kalam. This is one of the biggest myths you said about Ibn Taymiyyah. And the people who say this are using kalam. They're using kalam, an aspect of kalam, sophistry, to say this. He didn't actually use kalam. He engaged in it in terms of refuting it. Like otherwise, many, as we know, classically, they weren't interested. They wouldn't even entertain it. Ibn Taymiyyah thought, well, I'll listen to what you've got to say, and then I'll fire back at it. That's how he used kalam, in the sense that he acknowledged what it was, broke it down, and destroyed it. He didn't actually employ its tools, because the tools that he employed were all Quran and Sunnah based. We can go into that, and I do have actually a video on it. But as I said, I'm going to recover that data so we could continue to work on that video, finish it, and then publish it. To all who are in the chat, just praise Allah that He kept you on the Quran Sunnah with the correct Aqidah. Leave these Shia alone. Ask Allah to guide you. Ameen. Jazakallah khair. Very true. Okay. What else we got here? I have a question, brother. What's your opinion on the fatwa given by Bin Baz permitting US soldiers to be stationed in Saudi Arabia? I've seen the logic for it. The logic that I understand, the rationale that I understand Bin Baz used is actually sound. But I believe it was the details presented were skewed, which is why I personally think the fatwa was flawed. I disagree with it, but in the Sheikh's defense, he was perhaps responding to the information that he was given. But I personally don't agree with that fatwa. But the basic argument, and this is from recollection, I should really have to look it up before speaking, is that, okay, we know the enemy in terms of disbelief of the US and the Americans, and we know the enemy that is Saddam Hussein and the Baathists, and their brutality of the Baathists when they get control of Muslims is far greater than what we know of with the Americans or with the West. Therefore, it's better to cooperate the devil to protect yourself. And that is legitimate, by the way, that the ulama do allow for that. But I think in this particular instance, this wasn't exactly the case. There was a lot of treacherous deals going on behind the scenes and things like that. So yes, that's why Albani disagreed with it. I think Albani had a better purview over what was going on, and he disagreed with the fatwa, and I personally incline towards Albani's position on it as well. Okay, so just to comment on this before we go. Bin Baz was 100% wrong due to the war between Ali and Muawiyah when the Romans offered to help Muawiyah, and he said no, so he went against the Salaf. Not really. I mean, saying 100% wrong, okay, but that has to be based on something more solid than this. This is a legend, by the way, that the Romans offered to help Muawiyah. It's a legend. There's no, to my reading into it, and I mentioned this legend at the beginning of one of the videos called, I think it's on Muawiyah. I think it's called Muawiyah. But anyway, in the Civil War series, I mentioned this legend, but it doesn't have an isnad as such, or at least I couldn't find one in time for the video. So if someone knows the isnad from it, the chain of narration, please bring it. But it's not quite like that. It's a bit different. Okay, so someone says, for the longest time, I mixed you and Brother Umar Shatil up because similarity in both of your voices. I mean, dude's got an American accent. I've got a North Yorkshire accent, Northern accent. So, but I don't know. Maybe the tone is the same. Anyway, I think that's it. I'll just put this on because I agree with it. Worshiping Taghut, typical baseless Khaji accusation. Yeah, people throw these accusations up and down. Most of these people have other issues they need to worry about at home. Often many of them are incels, wannabe AQ members. Yeah, we'll talk about that on a separate stream. We'll get into that. We'll get into the J word and some of these doubts and geopolitics in the Middle East and all that. Happy to do that. We just have to do it carefully, so we stay featured on YouTube. I will leave it there then. I think it's been 1 hour, 40 minutes almost. So and much of that was with the Q&A, which is nice. But next time, or hopefully sooner, in the near future, we'll have it where we can hear you as well. That you can have some interaction going. But I'll leave it there for now. So, Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.